Authorization required. Access accepted. Initializing record. It has been little more than 200 years since our declaration of independence from the Terran Union. It was a hard-fought battle. The casualties on both sides were enormous. War crimes were committed by both sides. Those were sadly necessary evils to get to our respective goals. The Terrans lost, and we won. My great-great-grandfather relocated from Earth to Mars. Let's see. In the year 2112, according to the Terran calendar. He was an engineer, considered one of the greatest back on Earth. He was the one that designed the habitats we live in today, and he spearheaded the terraforming project. His son, my great-grandfather, was also an engineer. He designed a new propulsion technology utilizing ion technology. With that, he also accidentally made a weapon based on the aforementioned ion drives. Those drives and weapons were used in the war, and they helped us earn victory over our oppressors. Each and every Martian contributed. Our ancestors were the best and the brightest humanity had to offer, and it showed in the progress we made. Our environment forged us to be hardy and diligent. We had to be inventive in order to survive this inhospitable environment. We had no other choice. We were and still are ahead of our brothers and sisters back on Earth in almost every way, technologically speaking. They still have the luxury of breathing outside without the aid of a suit. They have a population that is multiple magnitudes larger than ours. 14 billion since the last census. Mars is at about 1 billion. That includes our orbital stations and other habitats, which account for about 10% of our population. I remember learning about Earth, how we as a species went from apes and hunter-gatherers to the dominant species on our planet, and later to the dominant species in our entire solar system. I remember seeing those pictures. The blue endless skies, the blue oceans and green plains and forests. Those mighty rivers where the first cities and civilizations had arisen from nothing. We were also taught about the war, the crimes committed by the inhabitants of that beautiful planet, the crimes that were done against our ancestors. There was hatred and disdain for the people of Earth and the Terran Union. But after the war, trade and commerce resumed. No blood was shed for nearly 200 years. An equilibrium was reached. That was until they came. First contact was reached. It was, of course, the advanced Martian communications technology that first detected the message of the alien craft. First contact was, how should I put it, underwhelming. The countless tales of how first contact will be a massive game changer were false. After we exchanged some messages and they mapped out our system, they left, and life returned to normalcy. We attempted, as did the Terran Union, to come to some trade agreement, but all of it was denied. We didn't know where they came from or who they were. We didn't dare to attack an unknown entity. Not knowing the ability of that craft, we just let it fly around and collect data. And of course, we didn't want to leave a bad first impression. That was a mistake. It was year after first contact that we detected not one or two ships. There were dozens, if not hundreds of ships, and entire armada that dwarfed our fleets. Its destination was Earth. We didn't know at the time, but they wanted to destroy what they saw as the center of our civilization. They saw Mars as no more than a small colony, which would be crippled once they cut us off from Earth. They were wrong. They were not even aware how wrong they were. 200 years of restless push for progress, a 200-year battle for survival forged the Martian. And we were not only self-sustaining, but we were thriving. With or without Earth, we would endure. Once the attack commenced, Earth held, but with their technologically inferior fleets and unorganized defense was starting to be pushed back. They were unprepared for such an assault. A leak of information, something the Martian government didn't want us to see, became public. The videos, pictures, and messages pleading for help from Earth, men, women, and children slaughtered, eaten, killings on a scale not seen since the great wars of old and the War of Independence. No mercy was shown to those who surrendered. In one particular video, a family exited from a heavily damaged building held at gunpoint. A mother, father, and a little girl no more than 3 years old. One of the aliens grabbed the child from her mother's arms and lunged her at a wall, turning her into red mist. The alien showed something like amusement as the mother screamed in agony. The father, frozen momentarily in shock, snapped and attacked one of the aliens, but was shot. The mother was kicked and beaten and left as an empty husk of a woman. They made sure that she suffered as much as possible. That footage, among tens of thousands of others, ripped apart the propaganda that we were fed for generations, ripped the facade of inhumane Terrans. They are humans as much as us. We might have been born on Mars, but we are humans. Earth might not be the place of our birth, but it is our cradle. It is our home, as it is to any Terran. It is Earth where our ancestors made their first steps. It is Earth where we arose from ash as burning phoenix. It is Earth where we laid the first bricks of our grand cities. It is Earth and her oceans where explorers first set sail onto unknown horizons. Mankind has laws that forbid some weapons of violence against their fellow men. These beings are not men, they are beasts. No, no. Even beasts and animals have a right to live. These beings are nothing more than a waste of space that deserves nothing more than death. Mars has united once more for one goal: complete and utter destruction of xenoscum. No mercy shall be shown nor quarter given. We shall show them the definition of total war. We shall show them Martian supremacy. We shall show them human supremacy. They dared to step on our jewel and dared to kill our kin. Martians. Our kin is under attack from an enemy that is not of this system. Our home, yes, our home that we call Earth, is under attack. The very soul of humanity is besieged. I call upon our mighty fleets and our soldiers to fight once more. I call upon our industries to roar to life, and if ever we come close to defeat, then may your blood oil the chains and may your bones stoke the embers, for the fire of humanity mustn't fade. Terra, you called upon Mars, and Mars answers with fire and fury worthy of the title of God of War. End of recording. So what do you think? The old man asked a young boy seated opposite of him. What happened after? Did we go to Earth? The old man looked at an old suit that adorned the wall that sat behind a glass panel. Yes, we did. The young boy stood up and strutted to the thick glass, curiously inspecting the worn and torn battlesuit. What is this? Sic Semper Tyrannis? The boy pointed at the insignia of a raised fist colored bright orange. Around it was written, Sic Semper Tyrannis. It is a Latin term and motto of my unit. It means, thus always to tyrants. The gist of the meaning is that when someone oppressed, there is always someone who opposes them. The young boy pondered for a while, then replied, Who would oppress us? The old man thought for a few moments, shifting his gaze from the suit toward the floor. Son, once upon a time, a long, long time ago, we oppressed ourselves, each other, due to trivial differences. Even Terrans and Martians were once at war. Then came an outside force that united us. Many names were carved into stone. Some were written in sand and subsequently blown away, forgotten. Yet a day will come when even the stone will be buried, and then it will erode. The boy looked at his grandfather, then once again to the suit, not quite understanding his words. You went to Earth, right? Yes, I did. Your class is going this year, correct? Yeah, I was about to ask you, how was it on Earth, the gravity and all? The old man's smile faded for a moment and his gaze sunk to the floor. The gravity was tolerable. Now look at the time. It's past your bedtime. It's time for bed. Oh, but no buts. History lesson is over. Good night, Sonny. Night, Grandpa. As the young boy strutted toward his room for a restful sleep. The old man lingered for a minute more, looking at the worn and torn suit, before flicking the lights off and leaving. The only illumination that remained were the lights behind the thick glass panel that lit up the battlesuit that still stood defiantly. It stood as a testament toward human ingenuity and resilience. I'll be brief. You, the 101st Marine Corps, are the most capable warriors Mars has to offer. And you are given the equipment that were meticulously designed and engineered by Mars's best and brightest. From the cloaking tech that you thought was invisibility, but was not. Let's use blend in with any environment like a chameleon, changing color to match the terrain. The composite titanium armor with reinforced graphene can stop a tank shell, leaving barely a scratch on the suit. You will not have to drag it with solely your strength. You have an integrated exoskeleton that lets you not just sprint without fatigue, carrying half a ton of metal on yourselves. You can lift a small truck with relative ease. And if push comes to shove, you have a limited amount of propelled rockets on your shoulders, able to kill enemies precisely even when behind cover. AI-assisted aim, night, and thermal vision. As for your main weapon, the standard-issue VHS-12 rifle, the high-caliber explosive round edition, of course. But remember, you are not impervious to damage. This suit might as well be your grave, so men, be careful. Show those Xenos the strength of Mars and the strength of humanity. Godspeed. Those we the word of the general himself before we embarked on the transport ship bound for Earth, even if, as the general said, we are the most capable and fearsome soldiers on Mars, if not in the system. We are not immortal, and those last words will linger with each and every man present in that moment. We might be warriors, but we are humans, and fear of death is intrinsic to each of us, no matter how desensitized to it. Go, 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 go! Shouts and orders permeated on the narrow corridors of a transport vessel. Red lights were flashing, and even if it looked like overall panic, there was order in that chaos. A sense of urgency was present on each face in spite of said order. "Soldier, halt!" An officer shouted at a soldier adorned in the new battlesuit. "Yes, sir!" The soldier saluted. The officer quickly scanned the soldier's face and insignia with a small device. From the device then appeared a holographic display showing info on the soldier. Mikhail Reinhardt, 101st Marine Corps, Squad Wolves, Hall C, Pod 302. Soldier, now go with haste. Yes, sir. I was on this kind of ship before. I know of its narrow halls. But I forgot to take into account how the suit that made me only a few centimeters taller and wider would make me even more claustrophobic than I already was without it. The heavy footsteps were, I think, menacing, even for my fellow crew members, as I and my squad mate ran through those halls. The red flashing lights didn't make it any less menacing. If anything, they amplified the effect. "Get your fucking arses into the pod!" A man in the same armor shouted at the entrance of the pod. Sergeant Stanley, our squad leader. He was a man with whom we trained since the formation of our unit, but even now when we are fierce war machines going with no little fear to fight a foe that we barely know anything about, this man terrified us. His stature was a little shorter than the average Martian, late 50s with grayish hair and mustache rounded up with his thick accent to boot. Why were we terrified of him? We all knew each other pretty well. Well, we weren't pretty sure about Stanley. From the little info we do know, he is an ex-pirate turned pirate hunter, then Martian Marine. Why did the Martian military take in a criminal with questionable origins? God knows where he was born. Our squad leader, Stanley, or better known by his nickname from back in his pirating days, which no man dares to utter, the Scourge of Soul. "Buckle up, lads, we're in for a ride. I'll repeat once more, our first mission is to establish contact with any remaining Terran military or resistance on the ground. Our second goal is to kill as many fucking Xenos and soften them up for our lads in the regular military. We're the first wave, lads. Let's enjoy ourselves. Ha 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 ha." The pod was flashing red from the inside, as did the ship itself. "We're in for a ride" was an understatement. The countdown before launch was about to start. The nervous faces of my fellow soldiers was evident. For most of us, this was the first time we were ever on Earth, though I think that most meant all. Sergeant Stanley was still in question, though. 5. I saw a faint dot in the distance from the window. 4. That dot became larger, more dots. 3. Those dots, ships, not ours. 2 flashes of light. 1. Holy shit! Launching the propulsion came to life, unshackling us from our ship. We were barreling down to the Earth's surface at breakneck speed. In the distance, I could see that where we once stood was no more that Swiss cheese. Those transports were not really military. The price of early-stage mass mobilization. They couldn't even spare some military transports for us, goddammit. "Motherfuckers!" Sergeant Stanley exclaimed, followed by a grin that could be barely seen from under his thick visor. We saw other pods from the windows. Some were shot down on the descent. The tension grew as fire engulfed our pod as we entered the atmosphere. The tension was settled when the engines roared to life once more and the landing gear engaged. "We made it!" one of the Marines said. "Of course we fucking did it. We're the wolves, for fuck's sake." Sergeant Stanley said. "Now where the fuck are we, Mike Triangulate?" Sergeant Stanley asked. Yeah, I'm on it," I said as I was fiddling with a holographic globe of Earth. "So? Are we supposed to be in Paris, France, sir?" "I don't fucking know. You tell me." "Sir, Wait, did you say Paris?" "Yes." "Why, what a fucking field day. This will be a true vacation, ha 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 ha." We looked at each other as we did many times before, and surely will many times more in the future. We secured our area. It was surprisingly, well, empty. This was not expected. We started walking the center of the city, hoping that we will have some contact with other humans. And it will be a long walk, but even if we had a vehicle, it would be extremely, if not impossible, to traverse the amount of rubble and deserted cars there is on the street. The city looked like something we learned in school about the Second World War that happened on Earth around 400 years ago. Those old photos of destroyed cities would do justice to what we saw. "Well, where are the aliens? Hello?" said Sergeant Stanley. "Sir, I don't think we should talk." Sergeant Stanley held up his fist, then a finger to his mouth signifying, "Shh." The silence was deafening. Moments felt like hours. "Aha!" exclaimed Sergeant Stanley as he shot one of his shoulder rockets. The rocket quickly went to one of the damaged buildings where it struck someone or something. We quickly learned who it was, seeing the alien physique that dropped from the building ripped apart. Then they started firing from all sides. "Jesus Christ, how didn't the thermals pick 'em up?" one of my comrades shouted while taking cover. We took up positions in cover, then retaliated. "God damn it, where are they shooting from? Just fucking Shayjet Stanley was shot multiple times, getting him off balance a bit, damaging the suit slightly. "Shoot for fuck's sake," he exclaimed when he dropped for cover, and shoot we did. Our bullets ripped them apart, as did the buildings themselves, but they didn't falter. They kept coming. "Get some of this Xeno scum," one of my comrades said as he flinged a grenade, tearing apart multiple assailants. I saw a slight flash in the distance, then a line of what looked like energy or electricity just whizzed past me and into one of my comrades, hitting him straight into the head. He keeled over. "Alex!" someone exclaimed as he rushed to aid him. I could see that his helmet was dented, smoke coming out of the dent. I quickly deduced that it might be head trauma, though it didn't penetrate. The force of the blast could have crushed his skull from the inside. I did my best to cover my brothers in arms, but there were too many of them. "What in the Lord's fucking name is that?" Stanley exclaimed. I looked in that general direction to see an oversized, mechanized beast on 4 legs sprinting towards us. Even our bullets couldn't do much against it. We decided to retreat before it tore into us. "Over here," one said as he started running towards a metal door to a relatively intact building. When we entered, we managed to weld the door with the help of our suits and go deeper into the dark building. We could still hear the Xenos shooting at the building. Their standard, what seemed like energy rifles, were not really great against metal and brick. 19 out of 24 inches, Sergeant Stanley said with the most serious face since I've met him. "We need to find another exit. Stay close and stay alert." We traversed the battered old building carefully. There weren't many windows, so there was little when it comes to light. Our night vision aided us in that. When we were in hallway, Stanley halted us. He signaled me, who was right behind him, to get to the other side of a door. We were breaching. 3, 2, 1. He slammed the wooden door with his hand, launching it from its hinges to the other side of the room. We entered. What we saw was something we saw back home on those videos. But in real life, it was much more gruesome. We saw bodies strewn across the floor of the room, blood everywhere. It was like visiting a messy butcher. Then we saw 2 Xenos which happened to not notice us when we were outside, but were aiming their rifles right at us now. Stanley looked at what looked like a child on the floor. Its corpse was mutilated beyond recognition to tell exactly if it was male or female. But judging by its size, it was a child. Stanley's eyes went wide, bloodshot. He lowered his rifle, gestured for us to hold fire. He dropped his rifle and marched with heavy steps toward the 2 Xenos. They started shooting at him. The same rifles that almost got him of his feet not too long ago now barely stopped his march. He grabbed one of the Xenos by his neck. They were about the same height as us, bulkier with a reptilian face. He looked it right in its eyes and ripped its head off with his free hand. The other Xeno, seeing his friend decapitated so easily, still fired but started to fall back into a corner. Stanley turned his attention to the other Xeno, throwing a punch into its abdomen. It went clean in. Then, as the fist exited, the insides of the creature spilled on the floor. The Xeno dropped to the floor but was still alive. Stanley turned his head toward us. "Lads, new orders. Rip and tear until it is done." Without looking back into the Xeno, he crushed its skull with his boot, turning it into mush. Before we could react further, an explosion rocked the building. The wall was torn open, revealing the light of day. Stanley, without even flinching, charged toward the hole and jumped. I went after him to stop him, but it was in vain. At the same time we were attacked from our rear, our men in the halls were preoccupied. The few of us in the room were under fire, and Stanley was going berserk on the Xenos outside. I jumped out of the room to the outside to aid our leader. Stanley was not troubled in the least with tearing apart the Xenos with his bare hands. He would take a Xeno weapon shooting a couple of times, then bashing it into the head of any unfortunate Xeno to be closest to him. They were terrified. They were not expecting this to come from a mere colony, I guess. I shouted at Stanley to retreat while covering him as much as I could, but all was in vain. When they finally spotted me and aimed their weapons at me, I stood no chance. Stanley went out of sight. I was a goner. They shot at with full force, and as I started to formulate a plan to somehow draw back and regroup with the others, the beast came. With the size of a school bus and look that of a bull, it charged right at me, simultaneously firing its many weapons at me. As I was shot, my armor withstood, but was at its breaking point. Right as I thought I was on the brink of death, and the beast only a dozen or so meters from me, I heard a voice, a human voice, "Pour la terre!" A man with an antiquated rifle and bayonet fixed to its barrel jumped from above, landing on the beast's head, piercing it. It did nothing more to irritate it, but it started to scream when he started to empty his clip while the bayonet was still inside of its head. "Ayasne passeron pass!" another voice exclaimed. Then a hail of bullets rained upon the Xenos. The residents of Earth were fighting back with fury. Behind me, a man with a gas mask emerged, flamethrower in hand. A muffled voice said, "Brenn in der Halle." As he released the cleansing flame onto the nearest Xenos, burning them to a crisp, I was able to regain my footing, shooting at the Xenos until my clip was empty. Right as I was reloading, I saw a familiar flash, but instead of a whiz, I saw blackness. I woke up. I saw what looked like a cave roof. The lighting was artificial. My vision was blurry, but when it came into focus, I saw men, women, and children. The women were mostly tending the wounded men. Some of them lacked limbs. Children were huddled with their mothers. I saw what looked like a corridor, and a silhouette of a woman in a white science coat emerged, with a red bandana around her forehead. Lean build, light brownish hair with streaks of blonde with deep green eyes. She came towards me, looked at me, and said, "You are awake, mon ami." She offered her hand. "Welcome to the Parisian catacombs, the Western European Theater HQ.